So hi everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Ophir Gutelzon. For those of you that don't know me, I'm one of the co-founder of Unxeptable. I'm based in Palo Alto. Unxeptable is a grassroots movement for saving Israeli democracy, started back in 2020. I assume that most of you know about us, but if not, there will be more information coming up later. So today we are joined after almost a month, I think that we haven't. When we last time we met, we kind of like thought that maybe we are on the verge of like the Knesset is dissolving and so on. But since then, a lot of things happened. Today we are joined by Eran Etzion and by Noga Tarnopolsky that I will introduce in a second. But I want you to remember, I want to kind of like give a short brief about gathering truly on a critical juncture that is, as we look on the reality on the ground, the political landscape is shifting rapidly. We are gearing up to an oncoming election that we know that maybe happening on October 27, but maybe not, maybe before, maybe a little bit before. And hopefully they will be safe and real, free. But on the same time, we are seeing the alarming backdrop of the latest acceleration of the judicial coup. The structural democratic foundation is really challenged on a daily basis. Yesterday, maybe we'll cover this a little bit. The Supreme Court there is 18 minutes that are mind-blowing about how everyone is talking about the idea that it's clear on the open that they want judges that are leaning to some political agenda. And the internal crisis is far beyond the region, as we see the implication coming up on our direction as well. Many of you may have listened to the recent, some of the recent podcasts and the episode that we shared last week about Jewish terrorism and the Hagmar, the regional defense IDF forces in the West Bank. If you haven't, I will put the link later. But Jewish terrorism is also on the verge of rising. And to help us make sense of all of it, which is, again, what we gathered here to talk about, we're talking about the Iran war MOU, that beyond the specific deals of the MOU that we will talk about, it's really showing a fracture between Israel and American relationship. And for all of this, we are going to have two important friends and guests, Eran and Noga, that I'm going to add to Spotlight. Hi, Noga. Hi, Eran. Quick introduction for those of you who doesn't know Noga and Eran. So Noga is a seasoned independent journalist who has spent over 2 decades covering the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, human rights, increasingly fragile working of Israel political structure. You have probably seen her all over the news channels. So Noga, I really appreciate you joining us here. Thank you for being here. And Eran is a leading diplomat and strategic planning expert. Eran is previously served as a deputy head of Israel National Security and the head of policy planning of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And beyond many, many other things, Eran is officially also running for the primaries at the Democratic Party, led by Yair Golan, but he is definitely here on the capacity of his expertise as deputy head of national security. So Noga and Eran, thank you again for being here, and thank you everyone who joined. We have over 160 people. That's amazing. And thank you, Adva, for co-hosting from Madrid. And let's start. So what's going on? I mean, like, I'm waking up every morning, and every morning I hear different news about the MOU, about Iran deal, about the judicial coup. So I will let maybe Noga starting by giving a quick brief about what you have seen from a news perspective this morning, and then we'll dive deep around to what you understand about the MOU.
Sure.
Noga, you ready?
I'm ready to go. Thank you, Ophir.
Okay, go ahead.
I will be honest with everyone. It's such a social or societal and political and diplomatic chaos in Israel that it's hard to answer the question. But I'm going to try and list a few things that are going on that in an attempt to explain to you the reality inside Israel right now. One thing that didn't make the headlines is that the prime minister was forced to attend trial again today. And he's in a very particular situation right now in his trial, ever more desperate, if I may say. His cross-examination ended last week. And this may sound like it's great news for him. It's not, because Netanyahu's bizarro, not fully legal request for a pardon from the Israeli president was predicated on the fact that he said, I can't run the country and attend trial at the same time. This, of course, contradicted a promise he made to the Supreme Court as a candidate, but let's set that aside. What this means is that basically his request for a pardon, which was questionable to begin with, is now out. He no longer has to attend trial. He's coming to trial for a few more days because his lawyer has the right to question him very briefly in response to the cross, but that's it. He's now stuck. And I mention this because I see a similar pattern in Netanyahu's behavior in court and his behavior as head of state. In other words, Netanyahu had planned, in my opinion, as I understand things, that by now he would be done with the trial, not because he would have been exonerated, but because he would have simply undone the entire judiciary. His coup d'etat would have advanced so far that his trial would have become, in fact, moot. His request for pardon, now several months ago in January, was a result of him realizing his trial had not yet become moot. His coup d'etat was kind of stuck in the middle. And the reason I'm mentioning this and underscoring this is that we keep expecting elections to be declared, and the Knesset keeps kind of coming closer and closer to a kind of uncrossable a line you can't come back from, right? At a certain point, we will be 90 days from October 27th. We're fast approaching that date. And then there's nothing Netanyahu can do. That's the legal date for elections. But I want to underscore that I think Netanyahu's plan was either that he would approach elections as a conquering hero, you know, the new liberator of Iran, who knows, or that he could undo elections, because he's not acting like a candidate. He's not acting like someone who is preparing for elections. And almost all of the opposition leaders, not Yair Golan, who heads Iran's party, but Avigdor Lieberman, Naftali Bennett, who notably is a former prime minister and has the top security briefings, just like the prime minister, and others have warned us that the Likud and the prime minister are trying to muck around with the elections. And so I think that that is a major concern. For me, it's something I'm definitely keeping an eye out on. And the final thing I want to mention, the third point, is this Iran expedition, as Donald Trump called it, has turned into a kind of volcanic debacle for Netanyahu. So let's go back. Netanyahu has never been a beloved or a popular prime minister. He's been respected, he's been tolerated, he's been ignored when Israel seemed to be doing fine. He got away with a lot during that period of, 2 decades almost. Then October 7th happened. By the time October 7th happened, Netanyahu was almost an historically unpopular prime minister because of his efforts to change the structure of the Israeli state, to perpetrate a civilian coup d'etat. This caused an absolute rupture in Israeli society. Then the attack happened, the war happened. He has never been popular during this war, but somehow he was floating along. He's been holding on to power by the skin of his teeth and by sheer brutal force inside the parliament. But in terms of society, he's just been floating along until now, when it seems that he really is hitting a kind of rock bottom. There was a poll, a remarkable poll that came out yesterday from the Hebrew University and the Adam Institute, a much more sophisticated poll than what you normally see in Israeli media, an academic poll that shows that 92% of Israelis and 93% of Netanyahu bloc voters believes that Iran won this war. Think about that. So the walls are closing in on Netanyahu. His trial's not going well, certainly not how he hoped. His wars have ended up in catastrophe, right? I mean, there's no other way to put it. Hezbollah on Israel's northern border, Hamas insurgent on Israel's southern border, and Iran now basically traipsing around the Middle East like the new hegemonic power. This is really a disaster. And add to that Donald Trump's basically having soured on him. So all of this is to say to you that Israel's in a very delicate and very dangerous point, because Netanyahu, we've seen this every single day. We saw it yesterday. His representatives at the Supreme Court overtly said that, yes, they think they, as elected officials, have the right to change the type of country Israel is, the way the nation is administered. He will do everything he can to try and complete this coup d'etat. I believe he will do everything within his power, and his power is considerable, to either postpone or cancel or in some way manipulate the elections. I think he's put a lot of cronies in very top positions to achieve that.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean he'll succeed. The elections are very deeply embedded in the Israeli public sphere. But I'm just saying, I think Israel's in for a very, very rocky road over the next few months.
Okay, good. That sounds amazingly optimistic, Noga. But that's the reality. And I want to try and Eran, to try you to take us to the nuts and bolts that we now understand more. But since the MOU came on signed on Thursday, even more has been exposed about the relationship between Qatar and Iran and United States. So give us like your understanding of what's the situation now in this MOU agreement and how strategically it's impacting Israel power in the region.
Hi, good evening. Good to see everyone. Thanks, Ophir, for inviting me, and great to be here with Noga. There is a lot to say, as Noga was saying, and yes, there's a lot of chaos, not only in Israel, regionally, globally, very confusing times. Here is my take on the so-called MOU. It is a very dramatic, historic, negative change in the balance of power in the region, and it has global implications. It started out, this whole affair started out on October 7th. The nexus from October 7th via the Lebanese and Syrian front onto Iran, with the various rounds, if you will, of war that we had with Iran, both initiated by Netanyahu and joined by the US, ended up not only with none of the war aims having been achieved, but with Iran actually improving its overall strategic position, having played its cards much more sophisticatedly, much more strategically than both Trump and Netanyahu. And, you know, it's fascinating to watch now with AI. Obviously, I'm a lot on Twitter, probably Noga as well. So I started following now with AI that you can translate with a push of a button from Farsi to English or to Hebrew. I was constantly seeing the Iranian feed from some select sources, and they introduced the so-called 14-point plan just a couple of weeks after the war began. And, you know, I haven't studied it deeply enough, but my understanding so far, having watched it, the entire process, is that when somebody, and you know, you can bet that a lot of people will do that, when they will compare the Iranian opening position on the 14-point document and the signed version, the so-called delta or the gaps between those two documents are very small. In other words, Iran achieved its goals, and the US capitulated. There's no other word for it. Now, why did Trump capitulate? Again, we can speculate, and historians will dwell on it for decades. We can speculate too, but I'm not sure how important that is. The bottom line is what's important, and the bottom line is very clear. Iran achieved its goals, and I want to be very, very clear here, as somebody who has dealt with the Iranian issue for decades. Always, and I can't recall how many policy documents I wrote on Iran, Iran-Israel, Iran-US-Israel, and so on. Always, you start out with outlining the strategic goals, the actual, real, deep interests of the Iranian regime. And it was always regime survival and trying to get immunity from outside interference. That was their primary goal, beyond any other goal. And just, again, to give you a sense, the entire nuclear project was all about that. It was not an end. It was a means to get that immunity. And if you read the MOU, it starts out with exactly that, with a US ironclad commitment that it will not attack the regime, that it will not interfere with its internal affairs, and so on. So that's really a monumental achievement for the Iranians. Now,
and
they understand.
Just to remember that we started this war by Trump.
Exactly.
Even before the Trump was about to say, like, we are coming to help you.
Instead of a regime change, you actually gave them the perpetuation of the regime and the empowerment of the regime. Now, immediately when we say that, we need to realize that the Iranians are anything but stupid or naive, and they know that they cannot trust the Americans. They can't. So it's paradoxical. On the one hand, they are justifiably celebrating the achievement. On the other hand, they know that at least as long as they're dealing with this administration, its credibility is zero. And that's why they want so many other parties, third parties involved. And that's why Qatar is there, and that's why Pakistan is there, and that's why the Saudis, Egyptians, and as far as the Iranians is concerned, the more the merrier. They're doing around the negotiating table exactly what they did in the battlefield, in terms of involving, kind of pulling in third parties that would serve their interests. On the battlefield, it was by way of attacking them and forcing them to actually take their side, the Iranian side, and push the Americans to stop the war. And now it's as guarantors against American abrogation of yet again another agreement or negotiations. Secondly, this administration has now flipped its position entirely in terms of its overall vision for Iran, and is now completely aligned with the Obama vision. If Trump was hearing this, he would have exploded, but that's the truth. They're now speaking in the very same language that Obama spoke, in terms of, we need to recognize that Iran is a regional power. They have their legitimate rights. Trump is even saying, they have a legitimate right to have a missile program. And we want to invest in Iran. We want to kind of tear down the walls between Iran and the West, Iran and the US, Iran and the Gulf, Iran and the world, and so on. And we all saw that they're promising $300 billion in terms of investment, development for Iran, and so on, which, that's also important to know, the Iranians, one of the most outlandish demands of the Iranians from the beginning was compensation, full compensation for all the damages that were caused to them because of the war. And of course, they're now presenting the $300 billion as compensation. And that's not only Hasbara, it makes sense. They're paying them $300 billion. Of course, it's not clear exactly if this money exists and who exactly will invest, if at all.
It keeps sounding like the money that they promised to bring to Gaza. Like, who is going to bring it? Like,
yes,
where is it coming from?
Exactly. It's paper money. Yes. So we have full legitimization for Iran and immunity. We have the Gulf states already maneuvering and kind of understanding that from their perspective, because they can no longer rely on American protection, they will need to align, at least partially, with Iran. And they're already starting discussions, both bilaterally and as a group, on kind of bridging the rift, metaphorically and even literally, across the Gulf with the Iranians. And in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, again, the language of the agreement allows the Iranians essentially not to return to the so-called status quo ante before the war, but to have some sort of quote unquote now legitimate rights, recognized rights, for not control of the straits, and not really collecting toll or anything like that. But it's very clear. And again, it's amazing to read early Iranian documents because they spoke in very similar language. We have, because of the fact that we and the Omanis control the Hormuz Straits, we have expenses. So we need compensation for these expenses in terms of environmental protection and all sorts of other BS, excuse me. And for that, they will be allowed to collect, them and the Omanis will be allowed to collect some fees after the 60 days. And then, of course, there's the lifting of sanctions. And then, last but not least, the nuclear issue. First, again, and it's just mind-blowing to see how totally one-sided this document is. Because what it essentially does is it deals with all the other issues except the nuclear issue and separates them into two different kind of spheres. There is the nuclear sphere, which will be negotiated, and everybody understands it will take months, if not years, to negotiate. The Obama team negotiated for 2 years. So that's a nuclear issue, and the document separates all other issues. In other words, everything continues while we negotiate the nuclear issue. So they get the impunity, they get the lifting of sanctions, they get the investment, they get everything while the negotiations on the nuclear are ongoing, which really, is indefensible in terms of negotiation tactics. And then the Lebanese issue, I see that you want me to conclude, so just 2 minutes on Lebanon. As we all understand, there was a possibility for Israel to delink the Lebanese arena from the Iranian arena. How? I spoke about it, I'm sure, in our previous conversations. The famous Lebanese proposal that was submitted to Netanyahu more than 6 months ago to enter into peace negotiations and normalization with Israel, a proposition that Netanyahu chose not to react to until he was forced by Trump to enter into negotiations. And even when he entered negotiations, he did it not in order to advance an agreement, but to foil an agreement. If he would have advanced the negotiations, I believe we could have delinked the two arenas. But here too, he took the totally wrong way and created a situation whereby Iran can now link those two arenas probably stronger than ever under American auspices. And we see the result with this mechanism that excludes Israel and actually limits Israel and oversees Israeli actions in Lebanon, a joint mechanism by the Americans, Iranians, Qataris, and Pakistanis. So we got, if you want, almost the worst of all worlds. I do want to end with this opening remark with a positive note, and I'll elaborate later. Because of everything that Noga started out by saying, and the horrible internal situation and the upcoming elections and the anti-democratic coup and all of that, the last thing we need is to allow Netanyahu to continue run amok in terms of the various war fronts that he wants to open and extend and deepen and so on, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Iran, in Syria, everywhere. We need Netanyahu's hands to be tied until the elections, until we depose him and we have a legitimate, sane government, if you want. So what this agreement does, if indeed it will be enforced across the arenas, and for example, it doesn't touch Gaza. So Trump, well, ideally, from my perspective, it's not ideally, but you understand what I'm saying. It is not a bad scenario, despite everything I said, if Trump will tie Netanyahu's hands in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iran, in Gaza, in the West Bank, until the elections. We elect a new government, and then, we can talk in different terms, in terms of what Israel needs to do with America, with other parties. There are lots of opportunities and so on. But from now until the elections, the best option for Israel, for us, in terms of the real Israeli interest, which of course runs totally counter to Netanyahu's interest, is to have full, complete, and total ceasefire on all fronts so that we can focus on elections and focus on replacing the government.
That's a great segue, but I just want to mention, and that's part of the tied hands of Netanyahu. How do we differentiate Netanyahu government and Israelis and Israel, right? We on one hand we hear people like Ben Gvir having like a post that is blasted 17 million times about bombarding Lebanon, and we have I think like 25 Israeli soldiers. I think maybe I'm wrong on the number. Killed since the so-called ceasefire. So there is and on top of all of that, there is a cave-in both on the JD Vance side and I call it the Bibi camp. That each one of them is now fighting each other to increase the base for their own political reasons. So in that sense, what do you see? I know you can go first. What do you see the impact on the pictures that Israelis see in Israel about the Qatari Prime Minister, J.D. Vance, Kushner, and Witkoff? They're all around, like in the Islamic Republic flag, talking around, and on the other side, we see a lot of people in Israel kind of like say like, well, now it's time to stand against the American government and so on and so on. How does it all connect to the idea that tying the hands is also tying the ability of the IDF to fight and to protect itself? Do you expect us to see the Israeli IDF retreating from Lebanon at that point? I asked many questions. So yeah.
I for just technically speaking, Eran might be better to speak about this. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Israeli army withdrawing from Lebanon, even if it doesn't admit that that's what it's doing, because Netanyahu's in such a political corner right now. But I think it depends on the pressure that Iran exerts on the United States. First of all, I just want to say I agree with every single word that Eran said, and I might even take it one little bit further, because I think Israel right now is in a significantly worse situation than it was at the time of the Obama deal. I'm not saying this in the political, making a big screaming speech at Congress sense. I think legitimately, in terms of Israeli security, despite significant, even monumental Israeli achievements on the battlefield over the last 2 years and 8 months, I think that Israeli security, which is comprised of so many different elements, including diplomatic alliances, including the ability to retool and to rearm, including having a social fabric that can withstand such pressures. I think in every respect, and including having a US administration that understands the danger in which it's putting Israel. I think on all of those terms, Israel's in worse shape now than it was 11 years ago. You asked, the first question you asked had to do with how Israelis see this, right? I can tell you my sense. I think that Israelis are confused. Many of them are stunned. I think they're feeling alienation in an existential sense. I think that poll that showed that 92%, just yesterday, by the way, that showed 92% of Israelis believe that the Islamic Republic won this war, and 93% of those who voted Netanyahu's bloc believe this, is principally an indication of what I've been seeing, which is an extremely profound alienation among Israelis. I think it's very dangerous. It's dangerous for society. I don't see any of the opposition leaders yet having captured the Israeli imagination, something that could begin to repair the social fabric. I don't see Netanyahu capturing the public imagination. I also don't think, Ophir, that there are so many people in Israel talking about, you're like, yeah, let's defy the Americans. I think the problem is that there is a very small minority that is holding very extreme power in its hands. In a way, it's what Unxeptable has been saying for a very long time, your organization, which is Israel really is being held by an anti-democratic, theocratic, racist minority. I don't believe that this represents a significant chunk of Israeli society. I think in a worst case scenario, we're talking about less extremists of that kind in Israel than those who still support Trump in the United States. I'm saying this not as a moral comparison or anything. I'm just saying this to put it in a certain perspective. But the problem is that the people who have those points of view are some of the most powerful ministers of this state, and they're speaking out loud. One of the things Israelis are beginning to see in a way that I think is discombobulating for them, and when I say Israelis, I'm including people who loathe Netanyahu, okay? But one of the things you're beginning to see is Israelis starting to perceive Netanyahu as a loser, as a dish rag. Netanyahu himself mentioned this in his own weird way in a speech he gave last night in Jerusalem to a very right-wing group, Jewish News Service or something like this. He speaks there every year. It's one of the very rare occasions he appears in public, though this is obviously a pre-selected public. And he said, in the States, everyone is saying that I lead Trump around by the nose. And in Israel, everyone's saying that Trump leads me around by the nose. I'm mentioning this just because it was a rare moment that displayed that he does still have some connection with reality and he's aware of what people are saying. But I think the current situation is one of deep shock for Israelis across the board. I think it comes after an absolutely wasting 2 years and 8 months of shock and war. Remember, soldiers who are by and large conscripts are still dying here at the rate of, lately close to one a day. The war is not over for Israelis. And the government appears basically to have abandoned the North, which is a very profound statement in terms of even Zionist history for this government. So I think that Israelis are confused, vulnerable. I don't want to say paralyzed by the situation because I don't think they are paralyzed, but I think they're just exhausted.
Yeah,
exhausted.
And in that case, because you mentioned the idea that 93 or 92% believe that Israel lost the war, I mean, one of the big questions, and I think that what I hear from the media or the most of the media propaganda and others is that we lost the. They're trying to say that we lost the war not because of us, Israel and Netanyahu, but because America abandoned us. So that would be an interesting point. How do you recover this idea, Eran, that that people believe that there is no? I mean, how do we recover this relationship between Israel and America? I mean, and I would say American people, not just American, not just Donald Trump and J.D. Vance.
Yeah. So let me do some shameless self-promotion here, because as you said, I'm running for the Democratic Party primaries, and I'm running with a 7-point plan to fix all our geopolitical problems. And point number 6 actually deals with Israel-US relations. And my proposition is as follows. I wrote it a few months ago before, before everything that transpired in recent weeks, but it was already clear that we are at an unprecedented crisis, which is multi-layered. It's not only Trump and Netanyahu, it's not only between governments, it's not even only between political elites, it's not even only bilateral US-Israel, because it has to do with new regional and global realities and so on. So, and of course, there's always the Jewish community element of it. So my proposal is to have a binational, comprehensive dialogue between Israel and the US, which will, and also in my kind of business life, I deal a lot with public participation, digital public participation, collective decision-making, all sorts of interesting stuff, including with AI-assisted processes and so on, very interesting stuff. But obviously, I'm not proposing this as a businessman. I'm just saying that what I envision is that we have a complicated architecture of bilateral groups that will meet. One is the classic group that I know very well because I was kind of the point person of it for 4 years, the so-called strategic dialogue between Israel and the US, which is the highest level of dialogue between the two nations on kind of G2G, government-to-government basis. So we need a new group, obviously with new people after the elections, new government and everything, but probably with a slightly different combination than usual, because it was always very kind of focused on the classic strategic issues, and now we have a broader agenda. Anyway, this is one group, and then we need parliamentary groups between the new Knesset and the new House and the new Senate, and then we need people-to-people groups, and we need. I would even go for town hall meetings, all sorts of innovative ideas that are designed to really create a real serious dialogue, broad and deep, between the two peoples, not only between the two governments. And simultaneously, in parallel, I would have a group that would be exclusively for the Jewish community, between leaders, and that's also an issue, exactly who those people will be, because we know the gap between the institutionalized community and the actual community. There are complications there too. Anyway, a representative group, at least one, maybe more, on the American side and on the Israeli side, and all of this orchestrated, I would say, throughout a year at least. And really to go deep and essentially rebuild the relations between the two countries. Because everything that it was based upon is now either crumbling or changing or is put under a very serious question mark. Nothing can be taken for granted anymore. It's not only foreign aid, which is just one manifestation of it. And of course, everything is tied together in terms of, the other 6 points of my plan deal with the Israeli-Palestinian issue, with a regional agreement, with Lebanon, with Syria, with Iran, all those issues. And there's no way you can separate them from the bilateral relations. So I'm assuming, and this will be what I will try to do once I'm in the Knesset, and hopefully the Democratic Party will be also in the government, we will try to push very hard for a really radical change in our regional and global policies so as that we align much more with America's policies on all those issues. And to be very clear what it means that we push for the quick implementation of the 20-point plan in Gaza, which of course Netanyahu right now is blocking. The next Israeli government should push it aggressively forward. On the West Bank, the government explicitly says immediately that it has no intention to annex the West Bank, not de jure, not de facto, not anything. It stops aggressively settlement terrorism and all of that. It changes policy radically. And then if you want clean hands, it comes to the Americans and say, you see, this is a different government. As you said, there is a very clear distinction now between Netanyahu and his government and his policies and this new government and the real Israeli interest. Once this is made clear, not only with statements, but with actions, with policies, the whole kind of bilateral atmosphere changes, and it opens the door for the kind of dialogue that I mentioned. And I think really all of this is possible. It's not, pipe dreams. It's very possible. It's just a matter of decision by the next Israeli government. But I have to say, it's anything but guaranteed. When you listen to Bennett, to Eisenkot, to Lieberman, they're not there. So this is why I'm with the Democratic Party, and the stronger that we will be in the next government, the more we'll be able to push into those directions. The last word I would say is that I think no matter who is the next prime minister and what the composition of the coalition will be, he will meet with a very aggressive U.S. Series of demands on all the issues, on Iran, on Lebanon, on Syria, on Gaza, and there will be a very high bar for this new prime minister. If it's Eisenkot, he's never been in such a position or even a similar one. He was never even a minister. I don't want to.
We're getting too much into the details of the politics inside Israel, which is important because it is, again, we are all kind of try to focus on winning the election and for the pro-democratic camp, Jewish democratic camp. And in that sense, I mean, like I just, Eran, sorry for stopping you. I mean, what I'm kind of like wondering, from going back to the Iran MOU and the Iran deal, I mean, in the last 30 years or so, every Israeli believed that this is an existential threat on Israel. Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon. This is what Netanyahu put in our head. And not only Netanyahu, I mean, the whole security system was kind of like focused on that. And I mean, and I think that even everything that we've done in Israel was around making sure that there is no, again, because of the Holocaust, because of anything that is existential crisis is always like what drive all of us, many of us. So in that point of view, I mean, like, do you think, Noga, that the current opposition leaders is trying to find a way to talk? I mean, to imagine potential new geopolitical sense, or is it that they are focused on amplifying the idea that we have not done the work, that we need to fight against Iran, that we need to eliminate a nuclear weapon, and it's kind of like they're going to pick up on what Netanyahu was kind of like leading us. I don't remember who said it on one of the podcasts, that everyone has a little Netanyahu on his shoulder, on his head, that is they keep saying the same thing that he is saying. How do you feel like, from what you're seeing on the political level, that it's changing? And maybe you can add also one word about the media in Israel. Is the media changing the tone and trying to stop pumping the messianic idea that everything can be solved with power? Do they start to talk through the idea of political agreements?
I'm not sure how to answer this question because I don't feel that any of the opposition leaders have been speaking radically enough, by which I mean not extremist politics. I mean, Netanyahu's government is very radical, by far the most extremist in Israeli history and in the history of most, let's say, post-war democracies. What I mean is that in the period of this Netanyahu administration, in the last 3.5 years, something in Israel has broken. Not just October 7th, but absolutely, definitely around October 7th. And I don't feel, I mean, Netanyahu appears to me as a leader completely lost, with nothing to say. I don't think he has said anything that has even gotten basic attention from the public or provoked any kind of public discussion in a very long time. I don't think in the last year. But my concern is that I haven't seen the opposition leaders start to really roar. Now, in part, this may be because of what I was alluding to way at the beginning, which is we're in a, and this may be therefore intentional by Netanyahu. We really are in electional limbo right now, okay? Until this Knesset is dispersed, and at that moment, Prime Minister Netanyahu will become an acting prime minister, and his powers will be curtailed to a certain extent. Certainly, his powers to pass legitimate.
If he accommodates the rules and the customs of what's supposed to happen, he can say like, I don't care.
Well, I think he hasn't managed to trample on those laws yet, and I think he has the sense. I have the sense that the elections have remained something of a sacred cow in Israel. I think that when I've been asking myself in the last few months, why aren't there 1 million Israelis out on the streets, right? For example, Israel has one international airport, a country of 10 million people, 10.2 million people. Switzerland, a country of 9 million people, has 3 major international airports and countless smaller regional airports. Israel should have many international airports, and Israel has funded many international airports, but ongoing corruption of ongoing Netanyahu governments have swallowed up that money. There should have been one in Haifa. There should have been one down in the south, in Ramon. The country, the structure that holds together state really is at the moment unraveling. I don't believe, I agree with Eran, I don't think this is something that can't eventually be repaired. But I think Israel is in a very, very deep hole. So when I criticize the opposition leaders for not yet roaring, they may still be themselves in a bit of a limbo, wondering when they're going to be like Netanyahu. Until he himself publicly acknowledges that there will be elections and sets a date and the Knesset is dispersed, I think Israel is going to remain in a situation of stasis and limbo. And Netanyahu, whatever everyone else says, he set his coalition leader to pass a law to disperse the Knesset. He's done this, he said that. De facto, if we look just at what Netanyahu is doing, what he's doing is trying to postpone the elections to the very last minute. I actually think that if he mucks around too badly with the elections, that is something that could still cause the Israeli people to erupt. I think it really is sacred. But I'm still waiting to hear any of the opposition leaders break the matrix. I don't think it's necessarily that they have a little Netanyahu on their shoulder, I have to say. I think Yair Golan, who leads Iran's party, is a very different kind of a politician. I think that Gadi Eisenkot, who's been a lot in the Israeli news because he's been going up in the polls, I think he may have very little experience, as Eran alluded to, but I think he presents an extremely different paradigm of leadership than Netanyahu. I actually think, despite them all being pretty conventional, kind of your average white Jewish dudes running for office, unfortunately, I do think that each one of the opposition leaders presents a real change from Netanyahu. but I haven't heard any of them roar. You could say Lieberman is roaring, right? Lieberman has put out more and more, I would say, strident, yet very serious statements about the destruction that Netanyahu is causing to the country. Naftali Bennett, in his own way, also. Naftali Bennett has referred to the current situation as a betrayal of Israel without precedent. It's not like he's not speaking, but somehow I have the feeling among the politicians and among the media, much even worse, to be honest, that everyone is stuck in a lazy matrix. I have heard very few. Now, again, I want to be cautious. There's some brilliant Israeli journalists putting out brilliant work every single day. But when you listen to kind of your average radio, drive time radio, or evening time news programs that Israelis still count on, by the way, infinitely more than Americans. So this actually does have a significant media presence. I feel there's some commentators, Guy Peleg is one of them. There's some commentators who consistently hammer on this catastrophe of this government, but they're not enough. It's not yet a lingua franca in Israel to say what I think has to be said every damn day. I heard it on one news program today. Maya Rachlin, who is kind of a second-tier host on the national broadcaster, was trying to have an interview with one of Netanyahu's more lunatic Knesset members, Tali Gottlieb. And Tali Gottlieb was ranting and raving, really like someone certifiable, about terrorists running the Knesset, by which she meant Arab Knesset members. And Maya Rachlin did something I haven't heard any other journalist do in, 3.5 years, and say to her, what are you talking about? We have a convicted terrorist who's serving as a minister, right? Because
we need to find this clip. Yes, definitely.
Because Netanyahu is holding on to power so desperately and so strongly, and because Israelis are so exhausted, what should have happened in this country is that the entire government should have been kicked out on their asses on October 8th, given the magnitude of the disaster. So kind of like the Iranian regime, as Iran was alluding to earlier, that by surviving is victorious, right? The Iranian regime survived and is victorious because Netanyahu and Trump were so stupid as to start this war by saying, we're coming in to change the Iranian regime. And the Iranian regime, in many ways, is extremely weak. So this gambit that it's making right now for regional hegemony is really kind of galling, right? A lot of audacity there. And it could fail for the Iranians, but right now they're trying. And I would say, in a way, something similar inside Israel. Netanyahu, by holding on to power, by doing the smart and terrible thing, instead of resigning like even fourth tier, school teacher would quit in face of such a disaster, by allowing Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot to come in and save his ass, forgive my language, by giving him the cover of a conventional unity government during crucial time of the war. Netanyahu did what Iran is doing and what Hamas is doing, he was able to rebuild himself during this sort of political ceasefire. Again, I do think that if and when a date for elections is set, I think we're going to have a sea change of feeling and public atmosphere in Israel. And I definitely hope we're going to hear much more determined and definitive kind of statements coming out every single day, 18 times a day from opposition leaders. That's what Israel needs. And it doesn't have it yet.
And I would add on that, and we are close to the hour, that again, as of now, all the polls, even though people believe that what you just mentioned, Noga, the polls are pretty steady on the bloc side. Like it's been.
You and I have a slight disagreement in this.
No, that's the numbers are there. And one of our biggest challenge, that just to finish on that thought, is that if you look about the Jewish parties, right, we almost have we have a little bit of win on the Democratic bloc, comparing to the Netanyahu, Haredi, Ben Gvir, and so on. But neither of one of them cannot build a coalition without our parties. And
I want to say something about this.
Just to finish the thought, Noga, and for that, I mean, like, again, speaking about what can we do from here and how can we pressure and how can we talk more with our, again, obviously, if we can fly and vote, we should fly and vote. But if we cannot, we should definitely message the opposition leaders to speak more about that, because, as Noga said, I mean, Netanyahu is moving to a what is the right word, Noga? Like, to a position of like a de facto prime minister. But he can keep, if you remember the elections in 2020, he can keep running those in the next year or so. I mean, he doesn't have to be replaced unless there is a coalition built. Sorry, Noga, go ahead.
I think that if there are free and fair elections in Israel, that it's very likely Netanyahu will not be reelected and will not even be able to stay as a de facto prime minister. But I want to say something to Eran, actually. I would be interested to hear from him. I think that the Israeli polity is broken. And so that, while it's terrifying, it's also an opportunity. I think that we should start seeing some ballsy opposition leaders in Israel. Something, by the way, that I haven't seen in the States either. Really roaring opposition that's centered, sane opposition. I would like to hear people, Netanyahu is testing the waters about maybe a campaign, right? And he put out an election ad a little more than a week ago that's simply overt racism, pure alcohol, dripping racism, of showing Gadi Eisenkot, this party leader who has been going up in the polls, basically kissing up to Arabs. Okay? I think that instead of mocking him, which is what Eisenkot did, or instead of not saying anything, which is tragically what the rest of the opposition leaders did, I think they all should have screamed from high heaven, "You shameless son of a bitch! It wasn't Arabs who got this country invaded and 1,200 Israelis murdered. It was you. It was your policies." I think Bennett should stop being afraid of the fact that he established a government with an Arab party. I think he should embrace it. I think Yair Golan, who is one tough nut, who is deputy chief of staff of the army, who leads Iran's party, who is the father of 5 serving sons. I mean, it's almost a Lincoln-esque figure, right? I think he should get up on every platform possible and say, "You bet your asses we're going to have Arabs in our government. These are responsible citizens. These are doctors taking care of you." I'm here screaming as if I was a politician, but that kind of dialogue, I think, should be being heard in Israel. And I think that Netanyahu right now is so weak, he can be shamed. And I don't see the opposition exploiting this enough or at all.
Well, I think that you are preaching to the choir from Iran perspective, but Eran, go ahead.
I don't know. He's the candidate.
So we are now in concluding remarks, or Phil?
We are now concluding remarks, yes.
Good. So here is my prescription for most of you probably are not voters in the upcoming elections, but to me, these are the main issues that each and every Israeli citizen and Israeli supporter, American Jew, whatever, should look out for and push for. One is to make sure that each and every candidate that pretends to be an opposition leader commits to not sitting with Netanyahu. Not only not sitting under Netanyahu as prime minister, but also not sitting with Netanyahu, where Bennett, Eisenkot, or Lieberman are prime ministers, and Netanyahu is just a minister. Netanyahu needs to be ousted.
Netanyahu cannot
completely.
legally be a minister.
Yeah.
Guys, Noga, it's not like you to be so naive. It's not even a law. It's just a Supreme Court verdict
Ruling.
that can very easily be replaced and will be replaced in that scenario. So I definitely see a situation where Bennett, Eisenkot, Lieberman cut a deal with Netanyahu, sit with him, It may even give him, the position of the next Israeli president, because that's the only public office that has full immunity. So let's not be naive. And I think we need to push them very hard to commit, absolutely, to not sitting with Netanyahu in any capacity and sending him to the only place he should be sitting in for the duration of his life, which is jail. And that should be the unified position of the opposition. And right now, unfortunately, it's very far from that. So that's number one. Number two, legitimizing the Arab vote. What, again, should be trivial in every functioning democracy, that every Arab vote is totally equal to every Jewish vote, unfortunately, is not the case. And each and every aspiring opposition leader should say the opposite of what most of them, unfortunately, are saying now, which is we will certainly sit with the Arabs as long as they abide by the same, principles, platform of the new government. They are absolutely kosher for a majority government, for a minority government, for a blocking, as we say, a blocking coalition, for a minority government. I won't go into all the details, I don't have the time. They need to be totally legitimized. That's number two. Number three, each and every opposition leader needs to manifest its real position on the key issues. First and foremost, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Israeli-Arab conflict. We need to hear from them exactly what are their plans in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, and vis-a-vis Iran. And right now, they're evading, avoiding, and not saying anything. And to me, these are the three key principles that we need to demand from each and every one of them. And I'm not concerned, we in Israel, we're always used to, in each and every election night, we see the exit polls, and then we go to sleep, and we're concerned, in terms of what we'll find out in the morning, because we have some very traumatic experiences. This time around, I think we'll wake up in the morning and we'll see that Netanyahu has lost the elections, and he's not in a position to be the next prime minister. So I'm not worried about that. But I am worried about the immediate day after, whereby, again, both Bennett and Eisenkot and Lieberman will enter into negotiations with Netanyahu and will find common ground. So that's what I think we need to be worried about. And to me, any government that includes Netanyahu is not a real change government. And I personally will have a problem with it. And I hope that many Israelis will have similar problems, and they will go out to the streets and will demand from these people to oust Netanyahu, completely and totally, and not re-legitimize him in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. So I mean, I think we are all in agreement on that. I mean, and just again, because there's a lot of people that doesn't really know the votes of the election. I mean, the idea is that, not the largest party is actually the one that is setting up to set up the next government. It's a coalition. It's the people who are recommending to the president, who is going to be Herzog, about that, and that's why. I don't personally understand why there is no a block agreement right now between all the opposition leaders, what the government would look like.
I'll tell you why.
Win.
Because they want to leave the option of sitting with Netanyahu open. It's very clear.
So that's
very clear. They're saying it.
So I want to close the conversation, and just to kind of remind everyone, what can we do from here? I mean, again, so if you can fly and vote, and if you cannot, or you have extra, then there is a lot of grassroots organizations in Israel that will focus on go to vote, will focus on election integrity and first-time voters, and we will send a couple of links on how you can help them. And remember to talk to again, we are getting closer to the holiday season. I know that I sound almost like a Jewish professional right now, but there is a lot of opportunity to talk in your synagogues and to invite Israelis and to invite others, to pressure and to show solidarity with those who are fighting in Israel to change the government. to change the trajectory, not just the government, the trajectory of Israel. And that would be finalizing it. Again, I mean, like, we don't know what's going to happen with Iran and war, but again, I mean, if there is one, and I will send the link later, when Israel assassinated Khamenei, Eretz Nehederet, the local SNL kind of like came up with that, like, remember that eliminating me doesn't mean that you're not going to turn into Iran yourself. So there is a lot of things that we need to change in the trajectory. And I really am happy to see all of you here. And next week, important note, it will be the day 1000 since October 7th, July 2nd. And we are going to, with our partners, with DID and with Democracy and others, we're going to stream the main event of the October, what's the name of the October Forum, I think. No, October Forum, which is going to have an event around Israel, and we're going to have a discussion.
I
with
have
them.
to switch off. It was
Okay,
great seeing
Noga,
everybody.
and
Thanks,
Eran,
Noga.
thank you so much for everyone for joining, and to be continued. We'll win that.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.